tell me where my country lies, said the unicorn to his true love's eyes.
Represents a firm of gentlemen who recently purchased this house and all the others in the road. In the interest of humanity, we found a better place for you to go. Go home, go home. Oh, no, this I can't believe. Oh, Mary, they're asking us. And I told them we could pay double the rent.
I'd written a story, from having done these introduction stories, which went on the back of the live album. And it was about a woman who began sort of stripping in a tube train and taking off her clothes. Anyway, eventually she strips herself down and all that's left is this sort of tube of light. And it was something that caught William Friedkin's fancy because he was Mr. Hot and Happening in Hollywood at the time because he'd just done Exorcist. And he wanted to use that power to try and reinvent Hollywood and bring in a whole new team of people. And he invited me in as an ideas person, to brainstorm and come up with different concepts in different areas. He'd actually approached Tangerine Dream to do the music. There was a guy called Philippe Drouillet, who's from Heavy Metal magazine, who was an animated designer that he wanted to work on some of the visuals. And to me, it was a very exciting opportunity. Not because it was Hollywood so much, but because I love ideas, I love brainstorming with smart people, and that was suddenly going to be given a vehicle and given a chance to come to life. So I really wanted to do it.
I don't know why it seems so where my country lies, said the unicorn to his true love's eyes.
One of the aims of the record was to sort of look at Englishness in a different way, and therefore this title, Selling England by the Pound, seemed to be a good title for the album. So I made my recommendation.
For her merchandise, he traded in his prize.
Dancing with the Moon at Night was this attempt to sort of mix some traditional folk elements with more contemporary band arrangements, and I think even in the color of the voice I was using at the time, it was folk influence.
I think Dancing with the Moonlit Knight has got a lot of great moments on it. And when it starts out, you really don't know where the song's going to go, do you? And there was this da-da-da-da-dum-bum-bum-bum, which Pete wrote on piano, and mainly becomes a guitar figure throughout the song. Again, it's someone else's melody interpreted on guitar in two different ways. And there's that lovely bit at the end that we used to call Disney, which they started using for some reason on gardening programs these days. Shot of a gnome, and there's this tinkling 12 string saying, that's Mike's bit there, this sort of repeated chord pattern. But we all operated with rock instruments, but not like a rock group. We all sort of faded ourselves in very, very gently, and we're all being very pastoral.
Yeah, I think there was a growing sense of confidence, and also with that particular track, which I started off writing, I was trying to get a folk reference and sort of, if you like, protect and preserve some of the Englishness. So it was in the opening part particularly trying to capture something that was had more references to Henry VIII than it did to American soul music. And then with the lyric, it was, in a sense, about the commercialization of English culture.
The whole album's kind of mad, really. And it's surreal. Right from the moment where it starts off, where Pete's singing unaccompanied.
Cried the unicorn to his true love's eyes. It lies with me, cried the queen of Maybe. For her merchandise, he traded in his price.
The influence for that was the Labour Party manifesto at the time, which was selling them by the pound. And, it was the references are so scattered within that one album and everything, including the album cover painted by a lady called Betty Swanick, who just died recently. There was something about the whole kind of package that always makes me smile.
Selling England by the pound. Citizens of hope and glory, time goes by, it's the time of your life. Easy now, sit you down, chewing through their wimpy dreams. They eat without a sound, digesting England by the...
As far as I remember, Selling England was a relatively happy, calm period in the band's history.
all this emphasis on writing songs, and I hadn't really written any songs for the album at that point. There were things that were going on in my private life that made it almost impossible to do that. And so really I just had lots of guitar licks, and I used them all on the album. That was the thing, and in some ways that was perfect. It meant that the album took on a more fusion sort of feel, and it was a little bit closer to Mahavishnu Orchestra. There was some tapping, there was some sticking it through a Leslie cabinet, there was that influence. It was a little bit Beatley, it was a little bit that, but it was still very English, and so I had a great time just being the guitarist, not wondering about, not trying to be a songwriter. I think I only came up with one thing as a song, which was After the Ordeal, which started out as this electric thing. I think it plainly didn't work as an electric melody. No one could make it swing. Ended up being this kind of acoustic thing that had an electric bit on the end. But I remember doing this in Chessington. We were in this house in Chessington, and as ever, it was eccentric as ever, I think. For some reason, we were in the living room of a house, and of course it wasn't soundproof, and of course neighbours started to complain, and but nonetheless, the fact that it was slightly out of town, it was slightly quirky, it was slightly strange, it had that homegrown feel about it.
There's a fat old lady outside the saloon, paying out the credit card.
The sense of humour in Genesis was extremely important, particularly to me and I think Phil in some ways, but the tracks Will Have Found Supper's Ready and Harold the Barrel, I think we're trying to follow a tradition of English absurdist humour. With I Know What I Like, too, there was this sense, again, of looking at this repression in the English psyche. And in the line, me, I'm just a lawnmower, there's a sense of this guy grabbing hold of this lawnmower and mowing the hell out of the grass.
There's always been Ethel. Jacob, wake up, we got to tidy your room now.
Although it may have looked as if, there was more of a pop sensibility on this record, I think sort of Know What I Like was in part an accident. Often when we tried to chase things, we failed miserably. And I think we got to learn really that when we were ourselves and allowed things to happen, that we seemed to have more success and resonance with. I never really loved the chorus, which, of course I like my sections, but I think, that was one of Tony's melody on the da 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 da. And after a while, I got very bored of it. But it was fun playing the sort of jerkier and jumpier melodies of the verse, and doing that with Phil, and then getting into this more floaty, simple chorus line.
When the sun beats down and I lay on the bench, I can always hear the time. There's always been Ethel. Jacob, wake up, you got to tidy your room now. Mr. Lewis.
The band consolidated their reputation with the release of the lyrical album Selling England by the Pound. A single from the album, I Know What I Like, reached number 17 in the charts, and at last Genesis seemed to be balancing creative innovation and commercial success.
It's 1 o'clock. Time for lunch. Fandy-damny day. When the sun beats down and I lie on the bench, I can always hear. Listen, son, don't waste time. There's a picture for you in the
sun beats down and I lie on the bench, I can always hear them talk. Play? I'm just a lawnmower. You can tell me by the way
from work, our Juliet clears her.
Firth the Fifth was, well, obviously it's a kind of like a very strong sort of keyboard moment from the early years, and the way the guitar solo evolved is quite interesting, really, because I'd written, say, the three bits, and the second bit I'd written was just really a flute and piano melody, and I'd just seen it as that. And we were playing it, well, we'd played it a few times, it sounded really nice. And then one time Steve said, started playing it, and he started playing it sort of like this, and I thought, oh, great, and I started to put the mellotron in, big chords like this. It was almost like a joke. We were kind of doing it sort of like a la King Crimson, is how we saw it. Just to make this overblown thing. And I thought, actually, that's really good, this. So we then sort of, so for the reprise of that melody, when it came in the second half of the song, we said, well, let's do it this big way and see how it works. And it worked really well. And it gave a chance for Steve to actually do a sort of proper guitar solo.
Tony's melody, which I tried to interpret in a kind of slightly sort of Middle Eastern sort of way. I was bending all the notes, and I remember one or two people said, "Oh, it sounds a little bit Indian, almost like a sitar," and there was a note that I was able to sustain that would work 9 times out of 10 at the top. You do a high F sharp, and just with proximity to the speaker cabinets, it fed back. So it sounded like I had perfect sustain on every note. I didn't, but I was able to fade in the notes on the beginning of it and sort of wait for it, coast over a sort of atmospheric section, and then play this melody, which I think, although it was written as a piano melody originally, it became a flute melody, and then it became this guitar melody, and it's kind of become Genesis' most well-known guitar solo. So yeah, I was allowed to play forever, it seems, this great long guitar solo in the middle of something written by Tony.
Steve, I think, was starting to really sort of find his feet a bit more on as a player live and everything. I mean, obviously he always contributed, a lot of Genesis music obviously required sort of guitar, sort of acoustic guitar picking and stuff, where people notice it less, I think. People tend to notice lead playing a little bit more, and I suppose on this it was more of a genuine guitar solo. Some of the others are a bit tricksy, he was kind of thinking very hard about every note he played, and so it doesn't sort of soar in quite the way that this does, where I think he allowed himself to actually have a bit more freedom, with it. Particularly before the main melody starts, just some really nice little phrases and stuff, so it sounds more like a real guitarist.
some men, the sheep remain inside their pen. Oh, many times they've seen the way to lead. He rides majestic past homes of men who care not of gaze with joy. To see reflected there, the trees, the sky, the lily fair, the scene of death is lying just below. The mountain cuts off the town from you like a cancer growth is removed by skin. Let it be revealed. Is madrigal. I'm in and see will sing for me. No, not now, not now. Our dino songs as the same goes on till you're by the side men. The sheep remain beside their pen until their shepherd leads his flock away. The sands of time were eroded by the river of constant change.
I thought the cover was absolutely brilliant. Betty Swanwick, the fact that she'd done that picture, she was a member of the Royal Academy, and I think it was the front cover of their catalogue advertising the summer exhibition.
She seemed to have, a good combination of Englishness and yet unraveling or exposing the underbelly. And I went down to see her, and then Tony and Margaret came down, and I think I went the first time on my own, but then they came down together, and she was a wonderful character, and she had a parrot, and she kept on talking to the parrot in the middle of the conversation. You weren't quite sure if you were being addressed or the parrot.
We had tea on her lawn, but what was great was she just put the table was on the lawn like that, and she put sort of the tea on that, and it was everything was sort of sliding down the thing, very strange. And the whole time we were there was this parrot that sat on Peter's shoulder, sort of nibbling his collar. It was kind of a somewhat surreal moment. Anyhow, she was an reasonably old lady. Anyhow, she said she'd love to do it, but she couldn't do anything from scratch in a month, which is what we needed, So we said, well, can you modify the picture that you've got, which is what she did. She just took the picture she'd had and she added a lawnmower to it so that it fitted with the lyrics to I Know What I Like, and put these people behind the things. And it worked really well. And I mean, in many ways, it's the best piece of art we've ever had on the front cover. Whether it's the best cover, I don't know, but it's the best piece of art we've had on a cover.
So Betty Swanwick was a wonderful woman. She was a little bit like Miss Marples or an Agatha Christie character, full of life, very smart and mischievous.
She was a great old lady, and sort of nice seeing someone from the other world, not just the music world, someone in the art world who was up for sort of trying something.
For me, I mean, the cover was a great cover, the Betty Swanwick cover. That showed that there had been a change of sorts, and from that kind of very almost schoolboy graphic stuff, which was Foxtrot and nursery crime. In its way, it was done. I kind of felt it was a little schoolboyish. This was kind of something that was kind of elegant, the Betty Swanwick characters, and that stayed with us as well. I mean, it's a good album.
This album, I think we came together much more as players. I think it's the first, we sound convincing as players to a greater extent. In some ways, it was the most of the early albums. I suppose it's the most, it's a bit more technique in there and stuff. I always like to think the technique is just another sort of paintbrush in a way. It's something you can use, and it can be very effective at times. You should never take over. I think with some groups it sort of it takes over. It becomes the technique's the thing. You get a guitarist who can play so fast that you can't stop doing it and everything. And we're very happy to sort of sit down. I'm just very happy to just sit down and hold down chords, which I do a lot of the time. I think that's. And then other times you would go mad, and that sort of. The contrast works, and you just use it, and it illustrates something you want to try and illustrate with the piece of music you're writing. And I think that's interesting. And as you said before, I think Steve's playing on this was really good. Particularly, obviously, the first fifth solo was a sort of standout moment, I think, for his time with us.
I do look back on this one with fondness, although I think the others. I suspect Tony and Mike might have felt that the songs weren't as strong on it. I felt that it was an album that was big on atmosphere, very well arranged, very well played, lots of very interesting techniques, and everyone, you know, playing and toying with things, where form was perhaps secondary to the spirit of it. So there's no other album in the world that any other band has made that sounds remotely like that. There is no album that Genesis made that sounds remotely like that. So I love it for its eccentricity, its invention, and I was thrilled with it, and I still am.
I always liken Selling England and Nursery Crime as sort of similar feeling albums in my mind. I think the good bits are good and the bad bits are a bit dodgy, but I think there's some strong bits there, definitely. And of course our first semi-hit single, almost. Who'd have thought?
There were things that I was less happy with than others, and obviously I think you follow your own bits and pieces further through than everybody else's, but it's I think some of them could have been a bit sharper. I mean, for example, you know, I mentioned the chorus of Know What I Like, which didn't last for me as a pleasurable experience, even though, you know, it got us a hit. Most of our stuff took a few plays to sort of open up to a listener. But if they got it, it would stick around for quite a long time.
Between folks, me there's no mystery. One survived like a sea outrage, one so blue like the earth I gave. There is
in fact more than you see.
gone. Too long have I lay alone, not knowing which way to turn. And there you are, quite sure that you were right, knowing full well that I'd be the first one to go down, and you'd be the one who was laughing, except when things weren't going your way. And then the lady would say that she'd had enough, wandering around on her own. The day you left, well, I think you knew you'd not be back. Well, at least it would seem that way, because you never said goodbye. But when it comes round to you and me, I'm sure it will work out alright. And you'd be the one who was laughing and giving me something I don't need. And you know I'd always hold you and keep you warm. Oh, more fool me. Oh, but when it comes round to you and me, I ask myself, do I really believe in your love?
A flower?
You go down to Willow Farm to look for butterflies, butterflies. Open your eyes, it's full of surprise. Everyone rises and looks in the rocks.